Hello, my name is Paul Miners. Welcome back to another one of my Asana training videos. In this video, I want to explain how you can get started creating workflows in Asana. This is a feature that is particularly useful if you are on the Asana Premium or even better, the Business subscription, which is going to allow us to create some really powerful automated workflows for managing our tasks. Now, if you have any questions at the end of this video, feel free to leave me a comment below. And if you would like to get one-on-one help with setting up or optimizing your Asana account, or maybe you're struggling to get your team to fully adopt Asana, then click the link in the description below to learn more about my Asana support options. So let's get into this video, and let me just start by explaining what is a workflow. I like to think of a workflow as a predefined process that defines how tasks come into Asana and, more importantly, how they are managed through various stages within a particular context. So a good example to have in the back of your mind is maybe design requests. So maybe you have a designer on your team and the rest of the team are submitting requests for artwork that need to be created. That designer could have a workflow project in Asana, and as tasks come in, they are automatically updated and assigned to different team members. Subtasks could be automatically created and assigned as that design request moves through different stages. You could also use workflows for things like customer support tickets, development bug tracking, or development requests. We can use workflows for basically any type of task that is moving through various stages of its life cycle where we might want to automatically update and move that task along as changes are made. To create a workflow, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new project. So I'm going to click the new project option on my sidebar here. I probably wouldn't use a template for starting a brand new workflow. I think it's better to start with a blank project. And we're going to give this a name. Let's call this Design Requests. I'm going to make this public to my team so everyone in the team can see it rather than making it private. And for my default layout, normally I would go with a list view for a project, but for a workflow, I find the board view often works really well because we can move tasks through these sort of Kanban stages and track kind of where we're at. We could use the timeline or calendar for other types of projects, but again, for workflows, I find the board layout usually is best. You can see here, Asana is suggesting some of the ways that it can help me to build out this project with automated intake, prioritization, and progress tracking features. You could use the automated intake for building some sections and creating an initial intake form, but for the purpose of this example, I'm going to skip that because I want to set this up from scratch. Now, before we actually start creating our workflows, the first thing I'm going to do is define my sections up here, or the different columns or stages that we're going to move our tasks or design requests through. So for design requests, and again, the same logic could apply to support tickets, bug tracking, things like that, I'm going to have my first section be new request. So this is simply where new tasks come in, they get submitted into the project into this column, and from there, I'm going to then assign this to a designer, obviously look at the brief and see what's involved and assign it. But that's just my queue of new requests that have come in. I'm going to make my sections a little bit more detailed here. So I like in progress, I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to have a section before that called assigned to designer, and I'm going to drag this over here. So this is just going to be, as the project manager, once I've assigned it to the designer, it's now in this designer's queue. And that's just my way of identifying these are tasks that have already been triaged and assigned. I'm going to keep in progress. I quite like that. The designer will then move the task into in progress when they are working on it. I'm also going to add one more stage in here before complete. Let's add one called waiting for review. Whoop. And we're going to put that there. And then finally, complete. Yep, I like that. We'll keep that at the end. Completed requests will go there. Now that I've defined my sections, I'm going to head on over to this workflow tab. And this is where Asana is going to guide me through how to set up a workflow for this project. And the first thing it's asking me here is, how are tasks going to be added to this project? And there's three ways we can get them in. We can use form submissions. So on the right-hand side in my Customize menu here, if I go down to Forms, I can create a form where I can ask certain questions, and that form could be shared internally or with external stakeholders who aren't even in Asana, And anyone who fills it in, they're going to fill in their details, and that's going to submit a task into the new requests section here of my project. So that's one option. We can also use task templates. So again, under my customize menu, task templates here, this would be more for if I'm going to manually create a task rather than submitting it through a form, I can use a template, and the template will contain the information and the subtasks that I've predefined. Or we can connect other third-party apps like Slack and Outlook and so on. We're not going to look at that today. We're going to focus on these first two. So to create my form, I'm going to click this Form Submissions button. And the first thing I'm going to do is I've got the name of the form up here, which is just the name of the project, but I'm just going to put in a quick description. So I'm going to say, use this form to submit design requests to our team. So that's just telling the person filling in the form what this form is intended for. Now, name and email, these are required fields. The person filling in the form has to provide their name and information. And on the right-hand side here, I can build my form using various types of input. So I can have people fill in certain text, I can have people submit numbers, I can create drop-down menus with single or multi-select lists of options, I can input dates and request attachments. Now, the first thing I'm going to ask is what type of request this is, because I'm going to use that later to automate how this gets assigned. So I'm going to bring in this single select option, and I'm going to call this type of request. And I'm going to put some options here. Let's just say social media image, logo, and web page. So I've got a few different options here. I'm going to make this a required field. We have to fill that in. And here I can choose to connect this to a custom field in Asana. Now, I don't have to do this. If I don't, the information here, the type of request, is simply going to be put into the description of the task. But like I said, I'm thinking ahead and I want to use the type of request to assign this to somebody on my team. And to do that, I'm going to create a custom field. So I'm going to add a field here, and I'm going to call it request type, single select, and yeah, let's just duplicate our three options. So we had social media image, logo, and web page. And we can customize the colors here if we want. So let's do green, red, and let's go blue. If I want, I can choose to add this field to my field library if I plan on using this field in other projects, but for this example, I'm not going to. I'm going to choose to get notifications if the type of request changes. I think that's quite useful. And I'm going to say, yes, only I can edit this field. I don't want other people interfering with this. So let's go ahead and create that. So now this question that I'm asking, the type of request, is going to map to this request type custom field in my project. And if I just click done for a second there and go back to my board, and if I go to one of these tasks, you'll see now here's that request type drop-down list on my task. And I can edit this custom field anytime from my customize menu. I can add and change my custom fields here. But I'm going to go back to my form. And the next thing I want to ask is I want to get some details about the request. So I'm going to use this paragraph text option, and I'm going to say, tell me about your requirements. And again, I'm going to make that required. In the description here, I could say, what size do you need? Any particular call to action or graphics? So just something to help the person who's filling this in provide all the detail that I need. For this question, I'm not going to bother mapping that to a field, so I'm happy for that to just go simply in the task description. And then the other thing I'm going to ask is I'm going to give them the option to upload an attachment. I'm just going to call this relevant attachments. It might be useful for the person filling in the form to allow, upload existing graphics or logos and things they want us to use, but I'm going to keep that optional. So that's my very simple form. You may well take a lot more time than me to make this more detailed. And I will also show you one further feature here. If I go back to my single select type of request question, there are options here where, based on the input the person chooses, I can ask additional questions. And so I can create a branch. So if somebody says, this is a social media image, I can then ask maybe I'll put in this multi-select field. And I can say which platforms is this image being posted to. And we can put in here Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Let's just put in those three. And again, that would be required if they choose that. And if I wanted to, I could connect that to a new field, or I think I'll just leave that in the description there. So that's quite cool. That's an optional extra question I can ask if they choose the social media image drop-down option. So I'm pretty happy with my form now. I'm going to click done. Actually, no, but wait, before I do that, let's just review our settings. So the settings here are when the form gets submitted, what should the name of the task be? And I can use my various questions to name the task. So I'm going to use the, let's say, the type of request and maybe the person's name. So it's going to be, web page pool miners, for example. I can, of course, rename the task later, but this is just going to be the default name of the task when it gets created. I can also choose who should this task get assigned to when the task is submitted. So as the manager of the project or the head of the design team, I'm going to have this assigned to myself. That way I can then get notified and I will then assign this to somebody on my team. At the bottom here, I do have some options to share this link with other people. I can also embed this form on a web page if I choose to. And maybe I'll turn on this option to add another submission. I think that could be quite useful as well. So now I'm done. I'm going to click done. And if I ever need to, I can now copy a link to, or click view here to view the form. I can view this internally here in Asana, or if I copy that link and open a new tab, I could share this with anyone that I want, and they're going to see a page like this and they can submit that task into Asana. So let me show you how this works. Let's give it a quick test drive. So I'm going to say, put in my name, my email using text expander. I'm going to say this is a social media image. And so you can see here my extra question pops up. And I can say, I'm just going to put in some dummy text here about my requirements. And let's just upload an attachment. I'm going to upload my existing logo here because that's going to be quite useful. So I'm going to submit that now. And if I go back to my Asana project, you can see there the task just got created. It's called social media image pool miners. I've got the details of my requirements down here, what platforms it's being posted to, and you can see my request type field has been filled in here as well. So that is how we can create a form to submit tasks into our project in Asana. If I go back to my workflow tab, I'm just going to show you one other intake source, which is task templates. Now, this is really useful if somebody is manually navigating to this project and manually creating a task rather than submitting it through the form. And we can create a template with a predefined checklist of steps that we need to complete. So for this example, let's just create a logo design template. So that's the name of our template. I can define if this is a logo design, maybe this is always done by the same person on my team. So for example, I'm going to say Warwick here, he's my logo designer. He is always the one that's going to be assigned the tasks that are created using this template. I can also specify and pre-fill any custom fields. So it makes sense that I pre-fill this as a logo. In the description here, I can put in some text that is always going to appear in my task. So it might be useful to have information that I fill in, but I'm going to prompt myself by saying, client name goes here, client email, and let's just say requirements. And we can type that in here. And then down at the bottom, this is where we can create our checklist of subtasks that need to be completed every single time we do one of these logos. So we could say request requirements from client. We could say, design 3 concepts, get feedback from client. Let's do design final logo, send to client for approval. So that's our checklist that we're going to follow every single time. If I want, I could pre-assign these to certain people on the team. Maybe the project manager, Paul, and me in this case. Maybe I'm the one that does that. Warwick always does this one. I'm going to get the feedback from the client. Warwick is going to get do the final logo, and then I'm going to send it to the client for approval. So we can clearly define who is going to manage which part of the process. If I click on any of these subtasks, you can see it brings up the subtask panel on the right-hand side, so I can put in additional informations. And this is really where you can create and define your SOP, your standard operating procedures in Asana. And if you want to see more about how I use templates for SOPs, check out this other video of mine that I will link up here. I can as well set relative due dates for these in these task templates. So let's say for a logo template, typically we try and turn that around in 14 days. So this is going to be due 14 days after the task is created. And then I can also set my due dates for the actual subtasks as well. So this could be due on the same day the task is created. We need to have the 3 concepts done, let's say, within the first 5 days. We need to get feedback within 7, final logo within 10, and then we want the final approval by day 14. So we're sort of setting up our ideal timeline here. So now I'm happy with that. I'm going to click done, and you can see now we have this extra option, this other way that we can submit tasks into Asana. And to show you that in action, let's head back to my board. And now when I click the plus button at the top, instead of just creating a blank task, I can now choose my logo design template. So let's create that here. It's going to take a second, but Asana will populate the task with all the details. So I could say, right, logo for Apple. Warwick is assigned the task. It's due in 14 days, which is on the 26th. You can see my description here is ready to go, and I can fill in the client's details when I'm ready. And the assignment and due dates of the subtasks have already been taken care of based on the due date of the actual task, or rather, when the task was created. So that's the start of our workflow, and those are the 2 main ways that we can create or submit tasks into our project. Now, if you're paying attention closely, you might notice an issue, which is if somebody submits the form to create a task for, let's say, a logo request into the project, then we don't have that checklist yet ready to go. The task template is great because we've got that list of subtasks predefined, but what we want to do now is create a rule in our workflow. So if somebody fills in that form and requests a logo, we can add that same checklist to the task. To do this, I'm going to open my Customize menu, and I'm going to go down to my rules, and I'm going to create a custom rule. Now, this custom rules feature is available to users on the business subscription and higher. If you're on premium, you do have access to some template and sort of more basic rules here, but unfortunately, you will need to be upgrading to business if you want to create custom rules. But let me tell you, it is well worth it, as I hope you'll soon see. Now, our rule starts with a trigger. We have a bunch of triggers on the right-hand side that we can use. And I'm going to use the task is added to project trigger. And I don't want this to run on all tasks, because if we create a task from a template, I don't want this rule to do anything. So I'm going to choose here, only run this rule on form submissions from my design requests form. I'm also going to click this plus button here to add in another condition, which is I only want to add my subtask checklist for certain types of requests. So I'm going to say if this is a logo request, then we can add the subtasks. So I've got these 2 triggers here, and I need all of these triggers to happen. So a new task needs to be created from the design requests form, and the request needs to be a logo. Now I can perform actions. So I have a bunch of actions here that I can perform. It could be changing the assignee, could be creating additional tasks, turning this into an approval. But for this example, I'm going to create a list of subtasks. And so I would just create the same checklist that I did before. So there we go, I've created my checklist now. As you can see, I've put the same assignees, the same due dates on here, which are, it's going to create the subtask due on the same day. But we do also now have these new options in Asana at the time of recording, which is I can use different variables. So rather than creating or setting the due dates of the subtasks based on when the parent task was created, I can actually set the due date based on the start date or due date of the actual parent task. So maybe if the parent task is due in 3 weeks, this would then, the subtask due date would correspond to that due date. So I have those options now, which is really nice. And so now I can create my rule. And so if we look at this in practice now, let's go back to the form that we created earlier. We'll view the form. This time I'm going to submit a logo request. And if this works properly, when this gets submitted, my rule is then going to run. And we can see here, before I even had a chance to pause, the subtasks got created. So that's really nice because it means it doesn't matter if I submit a task into the project using the form or if I use my predefined template. That rule that I've created, which I can now edit here, is going to capture all use cases. Of course, if I'm further building out this project, I would probably have 2 other rules, which I would have run if it's a social media image and web page. So I would have rules to add the appropriate tasks regardless of, depending on what type of request is being submitted. So that's a little look at rules. In my opinion, one of the most powerful parts of Asana, which is really useful in helping us to build out our workflows, because we can create rules so that as tasks are created, or if they move through different stages of the project, or if custom fields and statuses change, we can perform actions to change the assignee, post comments, and update the task. And in doing so, we can create this really nice automated process so that as the team update that task, Asana just kind of tells them what to do based on the rules that you've created. Now, I do just want to show you a couple of other things on this workflow tab. As you can see so far, we've defined how we want to input tasks into the project. If I scroll along here, you can see Asana is highlighting each section or column that I've created, and it's just prompting me and suggesting different ways that we can update or manage the task when it moves to that section. For example, in this new request section, what I might do is add collaborators, because a task may get submitted into Asana or created manually by somebody else, and if that happens, I want to be a collaborator so that I'm aware of what's going on. So I can click this Add Collaborators option, and basically Asana is going to now guide me through creating a rule. So my trigger here is when a task is moved to the New Request section. I can add collaborators or remove them if I want. And in here I can just simply type my name in this case, and then create that rule. So that is a rule that's now linked to this specific section. If I go along to my Assign to Designer section, what I might do at this stage is when the task gets assigned, I want to post a comment and notify the designer. So I'm going to click Add Comment. And again, Asana is going to guide me through creating a rule. So when the task is assigned to the designer, that section, I'm going to write a comment. And this is where we can use those powerful variables that I mentioned earlier. So for example, if I click on People here, I can choose the assignee variable, and I'm going to put in the default @mention here. So it's going to @mention the assignee, and I'm going to say, you have a new design request. Please review and comment back with any questions. So that's going to be a comment that goes to the assignee, whoever that might be. You can see I also have these options here to add a trigger that will automatically move the rule to this section if some condition is met. So if I click on this, I can say when the task is assigned, and I could specify the assignee. So if it's assigned to Warwick, we want to move the task to the Assigned to Designer section. And that way I don't have to manually update the task, just the act of assigning the task, either by a rule or me doing it manually, will move the task to that section. I'm going to jump ahead to this waiting for review section here, and I'm going to add an action so that when a task is moved to this section, I want to create a reminder for myself to follow up with the client on the feedback if they don't get back to me. So I'm going to say follow up on client feedback. This is going to be assigned to me, but again, I could use a variable here if I want to assign this to the assignee or the creator of the task. I can use that variable, and I'm going to have this due, let's say in let's do 3 days. So I'm going to follow up in 3 days to get that feedback. And then for my final section here, I might just choose to create a trigger. I'm going to use a custom trigger so that when the task is or subtask completion status has changed. So I'm going to say if the task is marked as complete, that is then going to trigger a rule to move the task to the completed section. And so I've finished building out my workflow now. I can come in here anytime to review the rules and triggers for the different sections of my project. If I go to my Customize menu, all the rules that I've created in this workflow view can also be found here in the Customize menu. So again, I can change and update those in there. The last thing for me to do now is to show you the finished workflow in practice. And you can see, by the way, these little lightning bolt icons show me the rules linked to each stage as well. So just another way that I can quickly see what's going to happen, or how the rules get to this stage, or what's going to happen if I move a task to those stages. So just another way that I can edit those rules. But for this demo, let's go ahead and create a new logo design template. So I'll create that task. And if you watch what happens here, a few things are going to happen. Firstly, the template has created the new task. All of my subtasks here are ready to go with the due dates and assignees assigned. Now, because the template is assigning this task to Warwick, that's how it's set up in the template, my rule to move the task to the assigned to designer section, this one here, actually ran straight away because it was assigned to Warwick. We've already moved it to that section. I didn't have to do anything. And you can see Asana has posted this comment at Warwick Palm. You have a new design request, please review. Warwick can now get to work. And when he moves it to the waiting for review section, another rule is going to run. And here I just got a new subtask, which is to follow up on client feedback due in 3 days' time. And then the final rule we set up was when the parent task is marked as complete, the task is going to move to the completed section. And so that is a nice, simple workflow that I have demonstrated there. But hopefully you can see the potential and the power that Asana has. And so if you build out these really well thought out rules within your projects, whatever it is that you're trying to do, if it's design requests, support tickets, the rules are really going to help guide your team and tell your team what needs to be done next. And so in that way, it's actually going to be really hard to drop the ball or for tasks to get forgotten about. And you're actually going to be a lot more efficient as a team because Asana is keeping people in the loop, assigning tasks to the next person in the chain, and everyone's life is made so much easier because you're not actually having to think about what do we need to do next. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below. If you'd like help with Asana, click on the link in the description to learn more about my support options. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video.